Sterling Marlin came up the hard way. In those earliest years of his career, the media couldn't even figure out how to spell his name. For the broadcast of the 1978 edition of the World 600 at Charlotte, which was just the second Winston Cup start of his career, Sterling's name was spelled Stirling. Strike one. Later, it became Sterling without a G at the end, and it stayed that way until he showed up at Atlanta in the spring of 1986. And there it was on his uniform and race car, Sterling Marlin. His mama, Eula Faye Marlin, had put her foot down and said his name ended in a G, and the spelling of his first name has remained the same ever since. Sterling Marlin paid his dues as he tried to claw his way up to the top of the sport.
Hard crash just out of the tunnel turn involving Sterling Marlin. He hit the wall very, very hard on the 156th lap.
There is what's left of the Maxwell House Ford, driven by Sterling Marlin. The car made contact with the wall in turn one and then erupted in a huge ball of flame. Here it is.
We see him backing in the wall with the left front, and the thing, as you said, just erupts in a huge ball of flame. And that's not too much of a problem until the car starts drifting down and all the flames go back through the cockpit of the car.
Yeah, it had to get hot in there for him, but thank God Sterling got out of the car and is now being taken to the infield care center.
Here it is from another angle. You can see how much flame there was as the car slid down the banking.
Finally, he became a winner.
In front, Ernie Irvan closing ground. Here they come down the stretch for the final time. It is Sterling Marlin in the lead. Down to the inside comes the 28. Coming to the line. Sterling Marlin's going to win it.
2002, Sterling made his way to the top of the Winston Cup standings early in the season, and he stayed there for the next 6 months. It was the first time in his career that he had been in serious contention for the championship for that long. In September, however, he hit a stretch that knocked him off his perch atop the standings. As it turned out, that was the least of his problems. He was supposed to have had an MRI following this accident at Richmond, but he didn't have the time. After another crash at Kansas 3 weeks later, he didn't have an option. Marlin was diagnosed with a fractured vertebra in his neck and was forced out of his Chip Ganassi-owned Dodge for the rest of the 2002 season. Enter Jamie McMurray. As soon as Jamie McMurray made it to victory lane following his win in the 2002 fall race at Charlotte, his first thought was of Sterling Marlin.
I will tell you that victory lane was hard because I put myself immediately in Sterling's position, because I got to victory lane, and as excited as all the crew guys were, and Chip and Felix and my dad happened to be there, they gave me a cell phone with Sterling on it. And I remember telling myself, don't act as much as you wanted to get out and just jump on the roof and scream. And it's the biggest thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm respectful to Sterling because he's sitting at home with a broken neck. And there's no worse feeling than a driver getting in your car and doing well, much less a guy that's never won a race and a kid. Sterling wasn't a hero of mine, but he was one of the guys that I looked up to. He had been in Cup forever, and he'd won 2 Daytona 500s. And I remember meeting Sterling the first time, and couldn't have been a nicer guy. But you meet people that you see on TV, and you're a little starstruck. And I was starstruck by everybody in the Cup garage. And all of a sudden, Sterling was my team. He wasn't even my teammate at the time. I'm in his car. And he was super nice on the phone. But I just remember I'm like, you need to put yourself in his shoes and what that must feel like.
That Charlotte win seemed unlikely at best. Jamie had first run a handful of truck races in 1999 and then 2/3 of the schedule in the year 2000. Next, there was a full-time Busch Series ride in 2001 and 2002. Despite Jamie's relative lack of experience at NASCAR's highest level, team owners Chip Ganassi and Felix Sabates signed him to drive for a second team beginning in 2003. That was the plan until Sterling Marlin got hurt. Jamie got the nod to fill in until the injured driver could return.
I believe up to Kansas, Sterling had led the points like the whole year. Yeah. It wasn't just a car. It was like the car that year. Like they were super fast at most racetracks. And I was pretty nervous. I mean, like, I remember leaving the shop and, again, calling, like, my mom and dad and kind of telling them what was going to happen. And, yeah, I was pretty nervous that, like, especially leading into Talladega, it was unbelievable, Rick, because I had spent my entire career up to this point, and this isn't saying anything negative on any other race team I drove for, but Mittler Brothers was not a top-tier truck series team. That TKO Motorsports was not a top-tier truck team. Bruco, great team. It was not a top-tier team. It was a B team compared to like Childress or Gibbs or, I mean, it's just how it was. It was not affiliated with a cup organization. And now, not only was I getting in a good car, but I was getting in the car that was leading the, I mean, it was just, yeah, it was a great situation, but those can go both ways. You can get in those and fail, and then people never believe in you again, or you get in that and you do well, and it buys you some time.
Although Jamie had never before made a green flag pit stop in NASCAR competition, his first Winston Cup start at Talladega went well enough. Next up was Charlotte.
I told them the whole week heading to Charlotte, I was like, not a good track for me. I would say probably my worst track if I had to pick one. I was super intimidated by Charlotte. It was slick. It was bumpy. Bruco, historically, that hadn't been a great track for them. And I feel like I had only run there in their cars, and they didn't really like going there either. So when you're with a team and the whole week at the shop or for 2 years, they tell you how bad they are at a track, you tend to think you're not going to be good at that track.
During practice, Jamie went out and proved that he wasn't very good on Charlotte's 1.5-mile layout.
And I remember making my first run, and what I remember is not driving the car. And I say that I gave it wide open throttle. I got to the corner, it bounced, and I just held on until it pointed a direction, and I gave it gas again. I had no control. And Glover came over and put the window net down when we came in the garage stall, and if you know Glover, he's an interesting guy, and I love him. And he kind of is not looking me in the eye, and he's looking around the car, and he's like, "Well, little buddy," he's like, "You weren't lying." And I'm kind of looking at him, and he's like, "Not very good here, huh?"
There was a patch in turn 3 that left Jamie flummoxed. He was this close to being completely overwhelmed by the reality of his situation.
And I remember leaving the pits on a qualifying run, and I'm like, I don't see a concrete patch. I don't have time to see a concrete patch. And what I didn't know is I was driving right through it, and I would hit it, and it'd bounce me up the racetrack, and I'd miss the whole corner. So it rains out qualifying. We start 5th. The next day, I run the Busch car, and I don't remember where I started. It might have rained out qualifying for that too. I don't know where I started. But I remember I was running 3rd, and we were the fastest car on the track. And I'm like, oh my! And what happened was, I got back in the Busch car, and it was slower, and it had no power. And I remember going down the backstretch on like lap 1, and I looked in turn 3, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I see that concrete patch. And I drove around it, and it was smooth. And I'm like, I missed all the bumps. And the next lap, I did it, and also I just kept getting faster and faster and faster.
This is in the Busch car?
Mm-hmm. This is on Saturday in the Busch car. Yeah. And I'm like, I get it. I get it now.
Once he got things figured out, it was as if Jamie and Tony Glover and crew chief Lee McCall and the rest of the team hit the afterburners. They didn't just fall into the victory. Jamie led 3 times for a total of 96 laps, more than any other driver in the field. Sterling Marlin returned to his team at the start of the 2003 season. He and Jamie McMurray were now officially teammates. Theirs was a relationship born out of respect. My name is Rick Houston, and I hope you've enjoyed this production from the Scene Vault. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and while you're at it, let us know your favorite Sterling Marlin and or Jamie McMurray memory in the comments section below.